Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of vBrownBag. Tonight, we are going to be continuing with our Python for DevOps series, and I am very happy to announce that we've got Chris Arceneaux on tonight, and he is going to be doing an introduction to CI/CD with Python. This is something that I've been very interested in getting my brain dropped into, and we're going to do it tonight. Yay! So with that, oops, hold on one second. Let me close this. But first, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Get in on the conversation. If you are in the live audience tonight, you can @vBrownBag or hashtag vBrownBag on Twitter, and I will be paying attention and asking questions of Chris Arceneaux for that. If you are in the chat room in the window here, I will also be monitoring that as well within the GoToWebinar options. So if you want to say howdy in there, if you have any questions, you can throw them up in there. I'll be paying attention to both venues. We also have the APAC, EMEA, LATAM vBrownBag episodes as well. Those are on the other nights, and that's about it. I'm very jazzed. It's gonna be a fun night tonight. So without further ado, tonight we've got Chris Arceneaux. My name is Chris Williams. So we got the two Chris's on tonight. He is at Chris_Arceneaux.com, and I am at Mistwire. So without further ado, Chris, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I will give you the power.
Okay.
All right. You are presenter, sir. Cool. I can see your screen.
Okay. There we go. Okay, guys. Well, as you'll see, those that might recognize the icons, the three CI/CD systems that I have listed out today, some we're going to touch on more than others, is GitLab CI, Jenkins, and Travis CI. A little background about myself. I'm currently in between jobs. This coming Monday, I'm actually starting a job at Beam, so yay.
Congratulations,
I'll be a solutions Thank you very much. I'll be a solutions architect working on their VCSP team, their service provider team.
Very cool.
So if any of y'all listening, I look forward to working with y'all in the future. And I like to automate things. So the question that we're going to all have tonight, and then I challenge you to think for yourself throughout this entire presentation, is which CI/CD platform is right for you? For me, I'll give a very brief background on the journey that I've gone up thus far with what I'm currently using today, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of pros and cons and live demo like I talked about for all of y'all to see. In which of this, hopefully there's some good content for y'all, as well as y'all can see some similarities with the problems that I had, the good stuff that I saw, which will help y'all, further in y'all's journey as well. So whenever it came down to it, whenever I first knew that I need to implement a CI/CD platform where I worked, the name that I kept hearing everywhere was Jenkins. And for good reason. They've been around for a bit. They've got tons of plugins. You can do about anything you want to. And also the company that I was at wasn't really, they were all full on open source if you can. And so we put in open source Jenkins. Very quickly after getting Jenkins in place, I felt like for the kind of work that my team was doing, it was just a little too much. How can I explain that good? Jenkins has tons of plugins, and if you're using the open source version, and so you're not using their approved plugins, then there's the possibility for plugin mismatches and library mismatches and stuff like that. So there's a negative there. Not bad on Jenkins, just bad on the open source piece. And I was restricted to the open source. The other issue that I had with Jenkins was, I think, this is my personal opinion, I feel that Jenkins shines whenever it comes to like a traditional software development platform where you're working on some rather big projects, right? Jenkins can shine for that. I was doing data center automation, which is essentially, automating backups in the data center, automating whatever I can, basically, that has an API. That's what I was doing. And so there wasn't like one big application that my team and I were working on. And so what that meant is for every single repository, Git repository that we had, I had to stand that up, and we used GitLab. We used at the time GitLab for our repository management. And we had to stand it up there, and then we had to go over to Jenkins, configure it in there, and then all within the Jenkins web UI is where you configured all your CI/CD stuff. Without going further into it, that just seemed a little cumbersome for what I was doing, right? And maybe that is for you. Give it a shot. I don't have anything further to talk about Jenkins here, but hopefully I've given you an idea of that it's very robust and the kind of workflows that I feel it's better for. Then I was contributing to an open source project a couple years ago, and I noticed that they had CI/CD tied to it in GitHub, and it was Travis CI. And so I said, wow, let me check out Travis CI. And I really liked it. And the thing that I loved about it is I didn't have to go to Travis CI to go administer or primarily administer my CI/CD platform. The config for the testing and deployments and stuff, the config was all done in a file, .travis.yaml, that was in the root of my Git repository. And I loved that. I'm like, wow, I don't have to go to this other platform to constantly see what my configs are and if something's working or not. I can if I need to, but I don't have to. It's all right there. But as I mentioned, the downfall for me and wanting to roll that Travis CI out into where I worked at the time is Travis CI only supports GitHub and nobody else. Given that we were using GitLab, go ahead.
No, I said, interesting. Sorry.
Oh yeah. given that we were given that we were using GitLab, I then very quickly, I don't even know how it escaped me, because about that time GitLab CI had been out for a little over a year, and I'm like, wow, GitLab CI, it does the exact same thing and it works with what we've got. Let's check this out. And within a month or two of testing, I was sold. I was like, yeah, this is it. But we're going here, right? So with that in mind, yes, I'm a little biased toward GitLab CI, but I see pluses for both GitLab CI and Travis CI, and I'm going to go over each of those systems today. So let's get into the code. So let's start out with Travis CI. So, and I will mention that all the things that I'm showing you here today, I'm going to provide you links to all of the source code here. Tomorrow, I will actually post the slides that I was just showing you now on my blog, and so that y'all can hop in there, get the links information, and go access all of this stuff yourself. Okay, so let's start out with Travis CI. So this right here is a single Git repository. We open up here, we can see this is that repository. I've outlined both the Travis CI and the GitLab CI repositories, the demo that I'm showing y'all today, with the exact same format to try to keep things simple and straightforward for all of y'all. So let's get a look at that file. So this is a super simple CI/CD configuration. I mean, super simple. Literally, it's just saying, hey, I got a job, I got a script, and I want you to execute this command. Okay, I want to execute. Well, what's the version of Python?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I go into Travis CI, I can see that the last build, whenever I did reset it to this simple one, it starts out as most CI/CD systems do. It clones the Git repository. It then, and we'll see this later, it exported a variable that I had set. And then the way that Travis CI works is Travis CI, by default, natively runs its own container. So all of this stuff is running in a container, but you don't need to know that. What you need to know is that that it used a virtual environment. It does this all on its own. Mm-hmm. It tells me the version. This is from a newer one. That's not the one that I did. That's an older one, which is why it doesn't match up. Essentially, mine just says Python-V. And then it outputs that. And then it's done. Mm-hmm. Okay? The problem that I have as well with Travis CI with the free version, and I'll mention this too, with GitLab CI and Travis CI, if you have an open source product, they provide their service 100% free. There's some caveats in there, but it's 100% free, which is why, especially if you're on GitHub, you see a lot of open source projects using Travis CI because it's free. It's very nice to be free. So let's go back. And we have our basic one. Let's say we want to use that variable we were talking about. So here's how Travis CI would handle it. You'd say, okay, hey, my language that I want you to use is Python. And you could specify that I want this version of Python to be used. For Travis CI, this does not mean that you're running a different container or anything like that. All it does is they've built their OS out so that they have virtual environments. You're familiar with Python virtual environment?
We actually had an episode where we talked about pipenv and venv. So our viewers should be familiar with
There you go. Well, as you saw in Travis CI config, it actually enters a virtual environment. It's not using a different container or anything like that, and it bases it off of this number. And at that point, we're going to use that variable that I set up earlier to check out some stuff here. So because it takes a little bit because it's a free service, let's go ahead and kick this off while I go and where is it? Here we go.
So you kicked it off how? By modifying the YAML file?
Yeah. So I should have explained a little bit further. So I have Visual Studio Code opened right now, which already has credentials and everything to my libraries and whatnot. And I have all of the Git repos that I'm going to work with y'all today open. Mm-hmm. I just saved this file, and so it told me underneath this repository there's one change, and so I'm going to make a commit, and then I'm going to push that commit up to GitHub. So the second this clears out, we'll see that, and then if we go over to GitHub here and I refresh, notice the latest commit, variable demo, 17 seconds ago. Mm-hmm. And at this point, if I go back in here, we see it's received it. Travis CI is now booting the container or virtual machine that it is going to use to run my code. Actually, it started up very fast, probably because people aren't working right now, or most people aren't working.
So the Travis pipeline picks it up as soon as you commit it to GitHub.
It does.
Okay.
And you can actually, and we'll see real quickly what it did. It exported that variable, which I'll show you where that is in a second. It then entered a virtual environment based off of the Python version that I had told it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then the first thing it did was echo. It echoed the variable that I had set, and then it used this Python script that I had wrote to also echo that variable. And it's very interesting. I wanted to show you all the way this is done. So variables, whether it's GitLab CI or Travis CI, both of those platforms have the idea of variables, environment variables that you can use. Whenever you use those, it actually puts them as an environment variable. So in Python, if you did not want to have to always go through the motions of using arg parse or essentially taking in parsing arguments, right, for a script that you were executing in Travis CI. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you were using an argument, you might say Python hello world var space, and then, you know, in quotes here, you'd say something like, right?
Right.
And you pull this in as an argument. Right. Well, you don't necessarily have to do that if you're using a CI/CD platform like GitLab CI or Travis CI. You can use it just like you would use any other environment variable, and that just shows it here. Import the library, access the variable. You're done. Which I think is rather elegant.
That's very cool. Yeah.
But I tell you what, I've written a lot of arg parse stuff, and it can get hairy sometimes, especially depending on how complex things can get. Mm-hmm. And so you saw what it looked like. It printed it out. Let's go into a different one. Okay, so you're doing a normal.
Well, we have one quick question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does it use webhooks to push start the CI/CD pipeline process?
It does. It does. And a matter of fact, I was just about to go in there. So, good question. So here we have my active repositories, and here's the one that we just looked at. So if I go into the settings for this, you can actually select what you want it to build for. So you build push branches, build push pull requests. You can have auto cancellation, and down here is where you see the variable. Okay, basically I just type message right here, and I'll say 1 so I don't get an error. And then I said hello. I told it to display in the, so if you had something you wanted to hide, you don't have to check this, but I said, yeah, go ahead and display it in the build log. Mm-hmm. And then I clicked add. And once I added it, now every time this build executes, it's going to add that variable at the beginning. Interestingly enough, and this is something that I want to call out as a difference between GitLab CI and Travis CI, is whenever you enter a variable for GitLab CI, you don't have to put quotes around it. My first execution of this failed because it recognized hello as one and world 3 exclamations as another.
Oh, I see.
And it didn't like that. And so I was forced, because I had this space, and most likely it probably would have failed due to special characters. I was forced to put the double quotes surrounding it so that it wouldn't error out on that space. That is not the behavior for GitLab CI. It's not a big deal. It's just a nuance. It's one of those things that are good to know. And so whenever you want to add, so right here, add new repository. Okay. You sync it up to your GitHub account, and all you literally have to do to enable a repository is just click the check button, and then to go to the settings screen where I just showed you, and you can just leave everything default if you want to. Most of the time I do. And boom, the hook that you're talking about, Travis CI sets up for you. So you don't have to do that. That's done for you. Just simplifying the configuration. Literally, all you have to do to get started with Travis CI is create yourself an account, link it to your GitHub account. You sync it so it pulls in all your repositories, the names, and you just check the ones off that you want to run against. And as long as there's a .travis.yaml at the root of that repository, the next time you start doing commit, pull request, everything's going to work hunky-dory.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. I did the variable. I'm not going to run these, but just so you see kind of how it works. You've already saw the script run in the last one. This is just giving an example of how a script would run. The stages one is whenever you start to have more complex workloads, you can actually separate them out in stages. And where the stages is beneficial is, for instance, if I just put all of this, pip installs -r requirements.txt, and I put this, okay, technically I could delete this. Mm-hmm. Things will run. Okay, things will run. But if this fails, okay, even if this fails, because it's in the same section, mm-hmm. Before Travis CI says, no, I'm stopping to run, it's also going to run this.
Oh, I gotcha.
Right? So it's almost like different separate failure domains. And in a simple example like this, it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? However, the more complex your automation is, the more that becomes the matter. Flash, if it ran this next one without this one being successfully complete, maybe it breaks something, right? So that's where it can be beneficial. Plus, you actually are able to like name. So whenever you go run it, if you had multiple, let's see, build history. This one. Oh no, I think it was on the film. Yeah. So notice that there are two stages. This is what the stages are. They build and execute. I was able to put a friendly name on them that you notice here. Name, running the script. And then I had a build one as well, where I was installing the requirements. I then determined that was not the proper way to do that with Travis CI, putting the requirements in a stage of itself, because the stages are completely separate environments. And so you don't want to use, yeah. So whenever I installed the requirements here, and it did it successfully, and then I went down here to run it, it said, hey, by the way, I don't have the requirement. I can't import this. And so it errored out. And then upon further investigation, I realized that the proper way to do it was this way. Essentially, if you have multiple stages in this setup, before starting each stage, because I have this outside of it, mm-hmm. It's actually going to run those. It's actually going to install the requirements. Ergo, it's actually going to take a little bit more time up. One of the pluses, there's two pluses that I can think of off the top of my head, three, that really make a good case for Travis CI. Okay, one, it works really well with GitHub. And GitHub is where the majority of the code is nowadays. There's been some moving and whatnot, but still, even with people dumping after Microsoft bought and stuff, the majority of the code, open source code, still is on GitHub. Uh-huh. And so since Travis CI is free, yay. Okay. Uh-huh. Two, if you want to, it is an easier to test with multiple versions of a programming language in Travis CI. So I forget what the tags are, but it's like environment, and then you say Python, and then you can say Python 2.7, 2.8, 3.6, 3.7, and then you have your code down here below, and Travis CI knows that, hey, all this code down here, I need to set up separate tests against every single version of that language that was specified. And so that's pretty sweet. The other thing that a lot of people go to Travis CI for is if you're doing OS X development, which doesn't apply to this crowd or most of this crowd.
That's not true. It might.
One of the languages that you can use is OS X, right? So it can emulate OS X, and you can do your app development and stuff like that. Have CI/CD applied to that. Past that's where its strong suits are. Another thing that they do, which I don't consider necessarily a strength because you can access it outside, and this link is what I'm about to show y'all is in the useful links that I'm going to show y'all. Travis CI has this utility built in, their DPL utility. Whenever you read through Travis CI documentation, they have something called providers, and a provider essentially allows you to leverage systems very easily. So I'll give you an example of what a Travis CI provider can do. So if we go into my repositories, straight up.
Sorry, I love that.
I have this right here. This is the source code for my website, 100%. Okay, or my blog. Let's go to the Travis file I have, and we have this deploy, meaning it's going to use one of those providers we were talking about from the DPL. And then I've specified a number of providers. So one, I've specified an S3 provider. And using secure variables and stuff like that, and let's go through this real fast, I install Hugo. This is Travis CI doing it. I install AWS CLI. I use a Ruby-based gem for Markdown length. If all that stuff passes, I'm deploying those generated HTML files to S3. Okay, but only on the master branch. I set myself up a test where if it's not on the master branch, so on all branches, but the Travis CI branch can't be the master branch, I then deploy to a different provider called Pages. That Pages is GitHub Pages. And so essentially, if you go to Arceneaux.ninja, that's my production one that's based off of AWS. It's hosted out of AWS. But if you go to my test one, which is test.arceneaux.ninja, it's hosted off of GitHub Pages.
Oh, that's cool.
So essentially, if I want to play around with stuff or test something out, I can just deploy to a branch that's not master, and then I have an actual public place where I can go and see what the changes are and what they look like, and whatever I want to do. Just me having fun. But the reason I showed you this is so you get an idea of how powerful the providers are, without you having to know tons of extra API code and stuff to work with a bunch of different systems. And there's a lot of providers. You should check it out. Okay, you can work very easily with these systems. And while it's a Travis CI thing, it's native to Travis CI, you can totally use DPL inside of GitLab CI. So in my opinion, you get the best of both worlds. I think that I've gone over the Travis CI as much as I'm going to go to, and we're about halfway through on time. Is there any other questions y'all had for Travis CI before I pivot over to GitLab CI?
Not specifically for Travis CI. There was one, and you might want to talk about this later on as a piece of something else. But what would be the best for some value of best if you hosted your Git repository on site? We're actually using Git, GITEA. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. And they were wondering, as a use case, where would be the pros and cons for that? But I mean, you can feel that now, or you can feel that later if you have more things that you want to run past.
I can only say for what I've experienced, what I have experience with, and what has really worked very well for me, and GitLab CI. I mean, there is GitHub Enterprise. I've never used that on-prem, okay? But GitLab, the GitLab, whether you pay for it, it's the same cost for GitLab.com or the on-prem version, or you can use the Community Edition. Community Edition for GitLab is solid. I mean, like, easy, solid, and it has a good bit of the stuff you're looking for, including GitLab CI. So if the money strings are tight, that's something. If it's not a huge, maybe for security reasons, sometimes people have it on-prem. But if there's no security reasons and you don't have a huge developer base, you probably want to go with just use SaaS, GitLab.com or something like that. But Community Edition GitLab would be my recommendation.
Gotcha.
I like it.
Cool.
So let's go over to GitLab. I have the GitLab CI Python demo. Same thing we saw here. If you're familiar with using GitHub, you will have no problems using GitLab. Matter of fact, up until like a year and a half ago, the UIs, the web UIs between GitHub and GitLab, there was almost no difference. I'm sure there was reasons why they redesigned. But everything, as you see, is just right out in front. There's so many different things you can do, but you can keep things simple. That's what I love about it. Is it's a super powerful product, and the same thing for GitHub as well. But you don't have to use all these different features to have success. So let's go into the code. We'll close this one up. Close up. Save. Okay, and then we're going to go into the GitLab version. So the very first one that I had, I'm not going to run this one. It's just simple, showing the Python. That's the simple one here. I want to show y'all the stages one because it's so different. Because remember we talked about Travis CI, it uses virtual environments natively, right? It's not running a different container or whatnot every time you run it. You just choose language, which may or may not change the container, and then depending on the version of that language you select will be that virtual environment that it opens up. That is not the case with GitLab CI. GitLab CI is using straight up Docker, okay, or container registry and whatnot. That container registry can be public. That container registry can be private. It doesn't matter. And all the stuff I'm telling you right now, it's included in the paid version and the community version, the free version. For both Travis CI and GitLab CI, you should totally, if you don't already have it already, test both of the SaaS versions with some open source stuff. You can fork the repositories that I'm sharing with you today and just play around and see the difference and the cool stuff. So I'll read through very quickly. Here's the top. So image, this is straight up pulling off of the Docker public repositories. So I said Python, and because I don't want the latest, I said I want version 3.7. And so it's giving me the Python container that you would run Docker pull Python :3.7, that's what I'm running right here. That's exactly what that's doing. Before script means that it's going to run these. It's going to run these commands on all of the stages. This simply tells GitLab CI in what order the stages should be ran, so that the build should be executed. Should be done completed before the execute starts. Mm-hmm. If you don't include this, then GitLab CI assumes that all of these stages can be executed asynchronously, and you don't have to wait. This right here is the same as whenever I was you saw me in Travis CI putting the name of the stage. Mm-hmm. This is how you define the name of the stage in GitLab CI. This is the piece that really matters, where I say stage build. Oh, GitLab CI says, oh, okay, that's the first one I'm supposed to run. And then here's the script it's supposed to run. It's supposed to get set up in a virtual environment, okay, called vENV. It's then going to activate said virtual environment. It then installs my requirements based off of my requirements.txt. If anyone doesn't know how to generate a requirements.txt, just look up pip freeze, PIP space freeze, and you'll find it's fairly simple. Also, this is my plug, always use virtual environments, especially when it comes to CI/CD and making sure that your development platforms are congruent and, one guy's laptop isn't different from another. Mm-hmm. Okay, use virtual environments. And this is a fun one. It's artifacts, and you can use artifacts for a ton of things. Right now, what I'm going to use an artifact for is I'm going to save that virtual environment that we created inside the vENV folder. I'm going to save that, okay, for later use. And then, because I don't want it to live forever, 10 minutes after it does that, it's going to delete it from its system. That's important, because if you're using GitLab.com or the on-prem version, by default, if you don't have an expiration, those jokers last forever. Huh. And yeah, and depending on what you're doing, like maybe you were creating containers or something, especially if you're on-prem, that can fill up your drive space fast.
Gotcha.
So, yes, so that's where it's nice. And you can have 1 week, you can have 1 year. They make it pretty open there. If you're running the on-prem version, you can outside of this, you can also specify a global option to expire them after X amount of time. Now we're on to the next one, where I'm running the script, executing. It activates that virtual environment, and because that virtual environment already has my requirement, it is then able to jump straight into running my script. So let's check this one out. See this one in action here. Hmm. I'm going to make a commit. We're going to sync that commit up. And if we go back here, okay. And notice over here, we got things happening. So let's go to the CI/CD. We're going to go to pipeline. I want y'all to see this view. So here's my pipeline, and here's all the stages that I've set up. It's currently working on the first stage. If I click into here, it's going to show me what's going on.
Nice.
So I'll start up here. One of the, in my opinion, very big pluses of GitLab CI is it uses GitLab Runners to execute its workloads. GitLab Runner. What a GitLab Runner does, and you can install it on tons of operating systems. You can install it yourself. Okay, it can run on Kubernetes. If you have Kubernetes, yay. Okay. there's lots of different configurations for it, but essentially you can use GitLab runners that are shared, that GitLab already has deployed out in their clouds. I think they're in Google Cloud. And for those, just like Travis CI, for the open source stuff, they're 100% free. Okay. However, if you had a private repository, now for Travis CI, if you had a private repository, there's nothing free. If you want to use Travis CI in private, then you're going to have to pay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For GitLab CI, they offer you 2,000 GitLab runner minutes per month for free.
Oh.
I.e., if you're a small developer or you're just doing this, for kicks and giggles for yourself, GitLab CI gives you 2,000 minutes per month to use their shared runners. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. If you use any of the runners that you installed, there's no limit. Because the CPU power and stuff, it's all running on whatever system you installed it on. So for instance, this GitLab runner that we just executed this code from is actually running off of my desktop at my house. The only requirement for a GitLab runner is it needs to be able to access port 443, and there might be one other port, for wherever the GitLab instance is running from. So in this instance, it's GitLab.com, and so my GitLab runner needs to have routability and access to port 443 on GitLab.com. If you're running on-prem, then the GitLab runner needs to have that same access, but not against GitLab.com, against whatever your on-prem GitLab instance is.
Gotcha.
And you can have as many of these GitLab runners as you want. I mean, maybe there's a limit. I haven't seen it, and they're fairly robust. The ones that I typically run are the Docker executors. There's different kinds, and the reason I like the Docker executors is because it uses containers. And you might say, hey, I don't really know that much about containers, but you know what? With this setup, you really don't need to know that much. You don't have to. I think it's a stepping stone, right? You can start using this to get comfortable with containers because, I mean, you didn't have to do anything. You just typed image Python 3.7 and boom, you had a running container where you could run all of your Python 3.7 code again. And none of this code, especially if you're doing 100% on-prem, is ever getting shared out with the web, So let's see. We started out, installed virtual environments, created virtual environment, went into it, installed requirements, yay. Everything went good, and so it uploaded the artifacts. These artifacts were uploaded to the GitLab server. So look right here to the right. Now that they've been uploaded, job artifacts. The artifacts will be removed in 9 minutes. I can actually download this virtual environment if I want to. How's that for troubleshooting? You can say, hey, I want to keep my artifacts for 7 days, and 2 days later, after you've had a failure that caused a Sev1 event, someone's clamoring for an RCA, and you're like, okay, it's your cron job. All you had was your log. With this, you could actually go reference the virtual environment, download the virtual environment, open up that virtual environment on your laptop or server, and try to recreate what was going on, right? Cool. And not just that, for all of these things that run, you see exactly what went down, just like you were at the console running it yourself, whether it's Travis CI or GitLab CI. I mean, I think that's super powerful. Mm-hmm. Let's go into our next one. We finished the build where we uploaded the artifact. Let's go to execute. Oh, that completed successfully. Let's go check it out. So first thing it did, it downloaded the artifact. Then it ran those 2 commands that I told it to run all the time. Make sure we have virtual environment. It then went into that virtual environment and it then executed the code, which had the requirements in there, which was PyFiglet. Fig something.
PyFiglet.
There you go. PyFiglet. There you go. Thank you. To say hello world. And I can show y'all the code in there. Back here. There we go. I imported my code.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Thank you. And then I set the font that I wanted to run, and I said, hey, render it and print it out. That was it. And all this happened from that. It's a unique environment that I can replicate, and so you never have. And here's the key issues why people go CI/CD crazy is because when you combine CI/CD with containers, even if you're not creating your own containers, you just start in baby steps using the public repositories and installing requirements like you saw in this example.
Mm-hmm.
You have an environment that you know how it's built. You know every single package that was installed in said environment, and you can replicate it. And if you mess up the environment, guess what? Just revert to the previous commit that's successful, let it rebuild, and you're good to go. That's the strength of using CI/CD with containers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how complex your automation is, those requirements can become a lot longer of a list, right, than just my single one you saw here.
Mm.
So, and I made this comment in a separate vBrownBag talking about Ansible as well. But if you once you feel comfortable with this methodology and using the default containers to do your stuff, and you put that little bit of effort to further grow and figure out how to create your own containers, which is not as daunting as it may sound. You can take this workflow that took 19 seconds to run, and you can, or a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, because most of it was trying to install requirements,
mm-hmm.
and you can bump that time down to seconds. So,
hey, this all worked in dev. I don't know what to tell you. Now that you put it in prod, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and so, and let me show y'all where the variables. So, GitLab CI has several different places you can put variables. I think it's 2 actually. I'm gonna show you. Well, you can also specify variables directly in your GitLab CI YAML file. I don't think I've highlighted how those different. So the Travis CI was .travis.yaml, and GitLab CI is .gitlab-ci.yaml. But let's go look at the variables real fast. So I created a schedule here. It's literally a cron job. So if you go create, you specify whatever you want the name of the schedule to be. It supports cron format, okay?
Nice.
Cron syntax, yeah. And you set your time zone, set the target branch that you want to execute the code against, and then you can define your variables, okay? For this, I just type message and hello world. I didn't have to put the quotes, and it worked properly.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't want this on a cron job, and I wanted to execute it manually whenever I wanted to use it, I just marked it inactive. And whenever it's marked inactive, notice it shows up inactive for the next run. However, whenever I want to, I can go hit the play button, and it will run this. It'll run it over. The other place that you can specify variables for GitLab CI is actually on the project level, the repository level. So I can specify a variable in here, which, ooh, this is new. Ooh, I'm so excited about this. Is new. I'm sorry. I didn't see this before. This is like brand new. This was not here before. This makes me happy. So you notice whenever I showed you in Travis CI, whenever we were adding a variable, matter of fact, I can just bring that up real fast. Let's go on settings. Okay, it had display value and build log, right? And that's where I specify my variable. Well, this variable, environment variable, is the equivalent of a project level, the environment variable. So if I put message, okay, and I hit save, it's not masked, which means that it will show the value whenever you're looking through the log files for the GitLab CI run. But this confused me when I first started using these, because it has a state and protected. Previously, it didn't have this right here, this mask piece, and so I'm like, oh, protected. It must mean the exact same thing as Travis CI, and it's hiding it. But then I checked it, and I'm like, wait, this isn't working. What is the deal with this? And this protected thing is actually for something completely different. But this is very, very nice. I cannot use mask value with current. Interesting. Okay, I'm not going to get it. Yeah, I'll read on that up on my own time.
Probably need quotes now.
Yeah. The protected one, though, you probably know that GitHub has them, GitLab has them. They have the idea of protected branches. So branches that you, like, your production branch, that you only want certain people to access, or maybe you have more stringent requirements toward committing or accepting pull requests against a protected branch. You don't allow forced pushes against the protected branch. That's the protected that this is referring to. So if you check this, then this variable can only be used by a branch that is protected.
Gotcha.
So essentially, yeah, one method you could do is say your master branch, your production level branch, uses these set of variables, and for all other branches, they're QA or lab or whatever, they use these variables that are unprotected. And there's also the environments, which is also new too. They keep adding stuff, so it makes me happy.
Awesome.
So runners, if you're running on-prem, okay, on-prem, the on-prem GitLab, you will not have access to shared runners. Or you will have access to shared runners. You will not have access to GitLab.com's shared runners. The only way you can get access to GitLab.com shared runners is to be running in GitLab.com. If you're running on-prem, this looks the exact same. However, the shared runners, if you choose to create them, will be the ones that you create. Okay? So, like, I specifically registered this GitLab runner directly to this repository, this project, which is why I'm able to use it. If I didn't have this, because it's paused, and I've disabled the shared runners, then I have nothing to use, no GitLab CI to run off of. You might say, man, this seems like it would be a pain if I didn't want to use public shared runners, but I still wanted to run on GitLab.com, and I wanted to have the ability to apply these runners to multiple projects. And if you're running on the GitLab.com version, that's where the group runners come in. Because for the GitLab.com version, you have the idea of groups, which is GitHub's rendition of organizations. and you can actually assign a runner to an entire group, and then all the projects that are created within said group automatically have access to the group runner. So I like the idea of the group runners, of GitLab runners in general, because I can choose where they run. If you have an environment that's secure, and you want to run on-prem GitLab, you can totally have these GitLab runners deployed inside your firewall. They don't need internet access. And you might want to, depending on what your update strategy is, you might have issues with the OS updates, right? But that's another solution to solve for. You can run this stuff in highly secure environments and keep your security team happy. That's really the stuff I wanted to show y'all. There is one other thing. I'm just gonna show you how it works. I'm not actually gonna do it. You can run GitLab CI from GitHub. So if you really want to use GitLab CI, you don't want to use Travis CI, but for whatever reason your workloads have to be in GitHub. All is not lost, albeit it's still not the best in my opinion. For instance, let's go here. New. We're gonna say new project. And over here, CI/CD for external repo. Yep. And so if you say repo by URL, you can only use this if it is, you can use the you don't have to supply credentials if the repo that you want it to mirror is open source, right? Publicly accessible. If it's private, you're going to need credentials, which essentially allows you to use things other than GitHub as well, right? If you want to, and then if they have built-in stuff for GitLab, for GitHub, where you can authorize stuff and it'll work its magic for you. Essentially, all it's doing is creating a mirrored repo. So here's one that I created earlier today. Notice it says mirrored from, and then GitHub. Okay, and since I've done this and it's mirroring it, whenever I make a commit on the GitHub side, it will eventually sync up to this repo on the GitLab side. And when it syncs up, it will register that commit and it will execute the GitLab CI configuration file as shown in there. The problem that I found with this is that mirror does not happen super fast. So if you're troubleshooting something and you're trying to get to the bottom of it or whatnot, having to deal with this mirror and waiting for things to sync up so that your CI/CD platform will actually execute maybe some basic tests, that can get old. If you have to be on GitHub, because that's what the company uses and there's no way out of it or not, my recommendation is probably to use Travis CI or some other CI/CD tool. There are many out there. I've just mentioned the ones that I have looked over and that I have enjoyed and I use.
So a quick question from the audience.
Yes.
So since have there been any changes in Travis CI since the Idera acquisition that you've noticed?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Apparently they got bought by somebody, and there was a thing like, oh, Travis CI is going to pot because they were bought. It could be the same. Could be the same thing as like when Microsoft bought GitHub and everybody was flailing about that for a little bit.
I will say this, depending. Granted, I've been running mostly open source workloads. I've only run open source workloads, but within the past few days, just checking over things before this presentation, I went and looked, and most of the time, my workloads didn't start up for a minute or two. Rarity, they would start up, within a minute. Sometimes I waited 7 or 8 minutes for a 10-second workflow to run.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, it's free, right? If I was paying, I would expect a little bit more.
Sure.
With the shared GitLab Runners, because GitLab.com, that they have their shared runners. It was nowhere near the wait time that Travis CI had. Part of that is because those runners are actually on auto scale to grow and shrink within GCP, Google Compute. But that's another reason why I like to use my GitLab runner on my desktop, on a server or something like that, because it will run almost immediately. By default, the default setting for GitLab runner, and GitLab.com never reaches out to your GitLab runners. Remember, I said that all you need is like port 443 from the GitLab runner side to be able to access the GitLab instance. Essentially, by default, every 3 seconds, the GitLab runner, unless you've told it otherwise, every 3 seconds, the GitLab runner is saying, "Hey, GitLab, you got something for me? Hey, GitLab, you got something for me?"
Gotcha.
And whenever it sees that it has a job, it says, "Okay, I got it," and it starts. And if you've got multiple runners out there, whatever the first one who sees it, it's going to say, "Hey, I got it," and then it's going to hit and run.
Gotcha. Okay, cool, awesome.
So,
well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Quick question. Somebody went to Arceneaux.ninja and couldn't find the slides.
Wow, they're not there right now. Yeah, I'm glad someone went. I was planning on putting the slides out tomorrow.
See, this is what happens when you put things off. Somebody's going to jump on it and say, "Hey, what's going on?" Cool. All right. Well, they will be available tomorrow, and I'll also, when we post this up, I will take the links and put them into the show notes on YouTube as well. So the links will all be available from there as well.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, anything else? That was fantastic. I did
play around, guys.
I wasn't trying to cut you off. I mean, I didn't know if you're finished or if you're. Sorry. Never mind. Go ahead.
The only I would say as a final is just play around, see what works for you. Okay, there are other CI/CD tools out there. These are the 2 GitLab CI, Travis CI, that I feel are the best for people who aren't software developers and want a simple, straightforward solution. The thing that is so nice about all the code, the configuration being in that one file, is guess what? We already know how to reuse code. And so when it comes time, maybe it takes you a little bit of difficulty for that first project that you create and configure with CI/CD. But once you've done that, you've got that code to reuse. You go like, "Oh yeah, I've already done that before." You just copy that snippet and just paste it over, and you're good to go. So just play around, find what works for you, and I think you'll find that it's going to make your lives a lot better.
Nice, very cool. Well, I will definitely be syncing my GitHub account with Travis in the near future and playing with all this stuff. Looks super fun. Cool. All right. Well, let me make a quick round of the tweetosphere. Make sure that I got all the questions. I believe I have. Yeah. No, I think I got them all. Cool. Well, Mr. Arceneaux, once again, this was, as always, a pleasure. You're a wonderful presenter and very informative as well. Cool.
No problem. I enjoy coming.
Great. Everybody, thank you for attending, and we will see you again next week.